Hey guys, we're walking through the How to Quit Your Job manual, and this is step 6. If you haven't already, go back and watch the other videos. If you've been following along, thank you. Welcome back. For those of you who are new, go to 9to5ers.com and download the How to Quit Your Job field manual. And in this step 6, we're really trying to get to the actions. How do we actually move this ball forward? What's going to get us really over the line there? We've been doing so much prep work leading up to the point, and this is where the rubber hits the road and we start making things happen. So, with these things that we've prepped you with, you know your personality, you know the things that you've filtered through, you have your mentor. We've got to be able to pick something and move forward, right? We won't have it perfect, but we'll be miles ahead of if we had done nothing. So how do we prevent that extra downfall and still make things happen, right? It's just an experiment. So some decision points that we need for this experiment is how much time are we going to devote? How much money are we going to devote? And what are the results that we're going to look for? So with the time, you want to have a time limit that's long enough to see whether this was actually good or not. Now, that may depend on what it is that you actually go into. If it's something maybe real estate related, it may be a longer term play. But if it's something a little more active income related, you may be able to see results a little faster. So that will just depend on your particular scenario. But be gracious with yourself enough to be able to get through the hard times, to get through that marathon in the middle, and all those different aspects that may cause some other problems to rise to the surface that you would be able to work through and lead the decision to come to a success. With the money, how much money you're going to invest in this experiment? Now, there's a budget, there's a cap on it. We don't want to just keep throwing good money after bad. If this is going the wrong way, then we want to be able to say, like, okay, here's the plug. I've reached the end of my resources and move on. That's where that experiment is going to be kind of limited. We're putting limits on that experiment. And then the results. Was this experiment a success or not? How do we know? The only way to really do an experiment is to decide before you start that experiment, what are the results that you are looking for? Because you can't do the experiment, see the results of the experiment, and then decide. You have to decide before the experiment. If it does this, then it is a success. If it doesn't, then it's a failure. You got to adjust the experiment. So just set those in advance, those results that you're looking for, and then get to work. Take action.
During the experiment, as you're kind of tracking yourself, you want to be making sure that you're keeping a daily or a weekly journal and just kind of writing down your thoughts and your feelings and your results of how things are processing, how things are coming along. What surprised you? What did you think was going to take a day and turn into a week? What did you learn to never make that mistake again? And this is great for just kind of course corrections along the way and to go back and kind of reflect on what you're thinking, what you're feeling throughout the entire process. And the reason why we're doing this is not only to gauge in real time how the experiment is going, but you also want to make sure that just in case this experiment doesn't go the right way, you don't want to make good on the same road twice. You don't want to make the same mistake twice. And you want to look back at this experiment and be like, okay, I invested this much time, this much money, and I thought I was going to get this result. But over here on the right, these were my actual time, money, and results. And this is where it differed. And with that being said, it's taken me 7 different experiments before I got out of my job. And one thing that I learned early on, experiment number 2 or 3, is don't make the same mistakes over and over again. Like, you have to just change and correct and keep moving forward. I remember when I was selling life insurance and I got my license and I passed my tests and I was out there selling and I made $550 after having a 45-minute conversation with somebody. So I'm making above $600 an hour, quote unquote. And I left that place and I was like, I've never made so much money in my entire life based off of 1 hour of work. And I was like, I hate this. I am never doing this ever again. And I realized that just sales were not for me. No matter how much you paid me, I wasn't going to do sales because I just hated doing it. And that was one of those experiments that I ran long enough to where, and at that point, I hit that $545 or whatever I made it that day. And I just said, I'm not doing sales ever again. And that totally wiped out a bunch of options that I thought were open. And now those options are just gone. And you might on the surface think to yourself, oh, that sounds really bad. No, that's great. I just wiped out a bunch of stuff that I don't have to focus on anymore. Now I can move into a better direction. And you're just fine tuning it. You're turning that axe into a knife, and you're turning that knife into a scalpel, and you're turning that knife into a razor blade, and you're turning that razor blade into a double-edged razor blade, whatever the sharpest thing is out there. That's what you're going for. You're starting out at the axe in the first experiment. And when you get to experiment number 7 or whatever your experiment number is, it is going to be laser focused. And that's where you want to be. And that leads us to the post experiment. And after the experiment, requirements have been met: time, money, and goals. And I put that in there and I underlined it: time, money, and goals. They all have to meet, because if you don't hit the time that you told yourself you're going to do it, you don't hit the money that you said you were going to do it, the results are going to be the results. That's the only thing you can't really control, but you can control the time and the money that you put into it. But you have to do it. You have to do that, because then that experiment is pure and you can look at it and go, okay, this was the result that was supposed to happen. And what went right? What went wrong? And what surprised you? Now, what went right, that's what you want to lean into. And what went wrong, obviously you want to avoid that. But what surprised you, you want to kind of reflect back on that and just be like, this is a blind spot that I didn't know that I had. I didn't know that I didn't like sales. I like making money. I like helping people. I'm selling life insurance. Sounds like a win-win, right? Like, this is what I should be doing. I don't like doing sales. And I thought to myself, that really surprised me. So that helped me learn something about myself that maybe a Strength Finders or a DISC test will kind of allude to, but you're only going to find that out in the real world when you put the rubber to the road. And Reese, tell us about some possible results of the experiment.
Yeah, so we do these experiments and we're going to get some results, right? As Joe said, let's look at these results. What happens? So here's some possible ones. Number 1, you get through with this experiment and you say, man, that was a terrible idea. None of it went right. You're just kicking yourself for it. Well, stop kicking yourself for one, but really write down what it was that went wrong. Like Joe just said with his failed experiments, you want to use those to say, in my next experiment, I'm not going to do these things that went so terribly. I'm going to avoid these mistakes. So this whole situation of such a failed experiment can happen if you just have taken maybe a little bit too much of a big leap into, I have no idea what I'm doing, or you got some bad advice from, your stockbroker shining your shoes kind of thing. That's where you can really go down the wrong road. But don't be too hard on yourself, because there's really no true failure in this except for not learning from these mistakes. That's the only mistake you can actually make with this. If you pay attention to these pieces that went wrong and make adjustments in your future experiments, you will learn. That's the point here. Learn and move on. When I tried to get into some franchises, I was hard on myself for not being able to make it work. But then on the other side, coming out of it, it was like, oh my gosh, I learned that I don't want to be doing with this type of financing. I don't want to have to worry about these kind of unwritten rules and these backdoor agreements, and like all this stuff is just like, that's going on my list of I'm not doing that. So just pay attention to those, write them down, and then move on to your next experiment.
So the second result is, I don't know if it worked or not. You're kind of in this gray limbo zombie area of just like, like some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. Well, the experiment might need to be tweaked a little bit, and you can tweak it in different ways. Try extending the time of the experiment. Maybe you just haven't let it run its course long enough. It is okay to extend the time frame if your original time frame is too short. Goals. Are your goals defined well enough? So let me give you a weak goal. I want a better job. Well, almost anything can fulfill that requirement. So let's look at a strong goal versus I want a better job. I want to be self-employed. I want to have an office within 10 minutes of my house. I want to be generating $5,000 of revenue within the first 6 months. My business will be focusing on creating Facebook ads for other companies. I want a minimum of 5 clients within the first 6 months. I will show my presentation to at least 50 businesses to get my first 5 clients. I'll be working 40 hours a week for the first 3 months, and then we're working no more than 20 hours a week in months 4, 5, and 6. So both these goals could lead you to the same place, but the second one clearly states what success is and what it is not. If it does not have a measurable number attached to it, then it's not a goal. And that is the OKR book that we've hammered into your guys' brains, and it is part of the reading material that you guys should be picking up, along with the one thing that go hand in hand with this field manual. Is that first goal was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. And the last one was, I'm not even going to count it. The second one was a lot better. So Reese, what's number 3?
Yeah, so the third possible outcome here is, hey, this thing worked great. That experiment just went perfectly, and my life is much better because of it. And that's great, right? That's a great outcome. That may not always be the case, and you kind of hope it doesn't, just so you can learn some things along the way. But if it works out perfect, then great, move on. But before you just throw that experiment out the door because it was such a success, write down what went right. Pay attention to that, because when you reach that level of, hey, I've hit a new ceiling, and you will, I promise you, you'll want to look back at what worked and be able to replicate your success. Or on the other side of that, there are situations, and it happens many times, what got you that success in that situation may be exactly what's preventing you from getting on to that next step. So for example, what I mean by that, just because sometimes that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Say you got a whole bunch of real estate rental properties, and you built up enough of those and did well. It was enough to quit your job. Now you've got all these rentals. That may be exactly, you're working in it or whatever, may be exactly what's preventing you from going on and doing that next bigger thing. So pay attention to that. Maybe it's what was successful. You need to replicate that, or maybe that's the part of it that's holding you back from going to that next level after that.
And there's a reason why Reese ended that one. The success one was the last one, because it's rare that you hit number 3 on the first swing of the bat. You're probably going to run into option number 1 and result number 2 the first few times. And this is 100% normal and natural. And the reason for that is that you're kind of bouncing around in a dark room, and your flashlight is halfway working, halfway not. And every time you run an experiment and you fall flat on your face and you break your nose and you get back up and you start to go, okay, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? And then you keep going. Remember, everybody that's still in a job that they hate, they didn't get back up. They just stayed down and they pouted and they just ran out the course of the next 30 years and then just waited for retirement and Social Security to kick in so they could go and actually have a life for the last 10 years of their life. We're not doing that here. We're going to be the ones that get up, and we are going to find and claw and scratch our way to level 3. And the key to learn from the experiment is to adapt. And it says here in the manual that I ran 5 experiments and I've been saying 7. Well, I don't care if it was 5 or 7. It felt like 1,000. It doesn't matter. It was a lot. And it was just like, and if you run about 4 or 5 and they all fail, you might as well just say 500 because it's horrible.
It's no joke. That's what it feels like. And that's why we have that filtering process, because if you have a camera that stops working again, if you have all these ideas that you want to go do and you don't filter it down, that 5 experiments will very quickly become 50, 500, because you're just going to be chasing all these things that are like, hey, that's the next shiny object. So the important key here as you move these forward and these experiments is to have some grit. Go check out the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's a great read to kind of help you develop your own grit and help you get through this process of getting out of your job. But just some tips here on that is create a new experiment and run it. No matter what that outcome is, what that result is, keep experimenting. Measure the progress and adapt. Check out those results and then go create another experiment and just keep doing that process over and over. And however many experiments it takes to get to where you're going or beyond, or just continuing on forever, it's all going to help you live a life worth living.
So the semi-conclusion, and it's kind of bittersweet that we're here right now because, man, this manual, it took me a while to create this, and Reese helped out by proofreading it and putting his 2 cents into it, and so did my wife. And I went through multiple revisions of this thing, and I could never come up with a conclusion to it. And because I don't feel that there is a way to conclude this manual. And this manual, and I'll just read this verbatim here, is finished when you clock out for the last time at your current place of employment. And I encourage you, the reader, to reach out to us on our Facebook group or my personal email or Reese's personal email down here. And please give us feedback and your opinions. We want to hear about your struggles and your successes. The simple fact that you are taking serious steps to change your life needs to be commended. This is not an easy task. Your coworkers, friends, family may not be able to relate to your journey, but we can. Our group is a like-minded individuals that will push you when you need to get pushed and pick you up when you fall down. This journey should never be traveled alone. I did not travel mine alone. I had my wife, I had my accountability partners, I had my coaching group that was with me the whole way, and I would still be in my job if it wasn't for all of them. And I wholeheartedly want this to be your jumping off point to getting to that last clock out. And there is nothing sweeter than waking up that next morning and not having to go in and knowing that you're done.
Absolutely. And it's like Joe said, it is bittersweet to reach this point, because those of you who are a special breed, you are going places that people who stopped after the first video, the second video, whatever, they just won't be able to have that success that you will have. Because do you know how many people make it through to this point of the process that start out at the beginning? It's 3%. So if that's you, comment down below that I am the 3%. Let me know that in the comments. I want to know who you are, that 3% that are going to go out and make these differences in the lives and make this world a better place.